From sea to shining sea, America's favorite uncle, Bumpkin Bob.
Hey y'all, this is Bumpkin Bob coming to you from the Bumpkin Media Studios here in Silent Springs, Arkansas with the Bumpkin Bob Show. It's Saturday, October 14th here in the Ozark Mountains. Hope everybody's having a good day, good Saturday. Glad y'all have joined us this Saturday. Hey, I want to start out this week and give a shout out to my daughter's mother-in-law. She held Stephanie a baby shower last weekend. Turned out really good. Had a lot of people there. And I was going to throw something out. I built her a it's a bookshelf / quilt rack. And was talking with some people this week about that. And I used to have one here at the house, a quilt rack, and, a girlfriend that I had it here at the house. But I've got a quilt that's blue and white that my granny made me when I graduated high school. And I actually had two of those quilts. Second one was made for my ex when she graduated high school because she's a little younger than me. And one of my sisters one time was like, "How the hell did y'all get two quilts?" She said, "I don't know that I even got one, much less if I did that I still have it." I'm like, "I don't know. I guess Granny just liked me better." So if we got any Greg's family out there watching, I've got a quilt and I know where there's another one at. So anyway, I just thought that was kind of funny. A little bit of funny stuff. Anyway, another thing happening today. We film in the morning, and as normal, the Razorbacks are playing this afternoon at 6:15 in Alabama, playing number 1 Alabama, Crimson Tide. Let us hope that Arkansas makes a good showing. There's already been two upsets this weekend. Yesterday, Syracuse beat Clemson in one, and I believe Cal beat Washington State in the other. Both of them ranked in the top 10. As a matter of fact, Clemson was ranked number 2. But let's hope Arkansas can pull off that third upset this week. That would be awesome. A little bit of news that I got this morning is Nebraska, as everybody knows, fired their athletic director and hired an interim athletic director, and they've already retained a search committee to start looking for a new AD. Well, it was reported this morning by a couple of news agencies that Jeff Long's in the running. Now, I know that would not bother a lot of Arkansas fans right now if he is in the running, if he would take that Nebraska job and be gone. I know a lot of people wish that. And as of filming this morning, he had not made a statement. So I don't know, and we'll have that next week if he does. I do know that earlier it was reported that Mississippi State's athletic director was in the running, and he's already came out and made a statement saying that he's not interested in the job. Jeff Long has not, but if he does, we'll have that next week. The big controversy today, I think, and what everybody's waiting to see is who's going to start tonight for Razorbacks. Austin Allen, they're saying, didn't play the fourth quarter last week because he got injured. Had to go through concussion protocol, which they cleared him for concussion. But now some of the news agencies up here have said this week that they really don't think he's practiced to the point that practicing to actually play this week. Brett Bielema, Coach B, has announced that he will make the trip to Tuscaloosa, and I don't think I pronounced that right. I pronounced that like a complete bumpkin, didn't I? We'll just call it Alabama from now on. Anyway, he will make the trip, but he's kind of been vague about who's going to start. And it's one of those deals that, I I really think it doesn't matter who starts. Alabama's going to be ready for him. But that's kind of the only thing he had to play this week was, dangling that carrot about which quarterback was going to start and which one wasn't, so that Alabama would kind of have to get ready for both and split their practice time up a little bit, because that's really the only thing he had going this week for him. So it'll be interesting to see tonight who actually starts. My personal opinion, and I'm not a big sports guy as far as knowing, a lot of the ins and outs and stuff. I just personally feel like if they start Cole Kelly, Alabama will run him. He's he's a redshirt freshman. He's really only played in 2 games this year. Of course, he did get that full quarter of use last week, and he looked good, which was another argument people had this week. People were griping and bitching, saying, well, he did good, but he was in there against second and third stringers. And it's like, they finally asked Dan Enos this week at one of the press conferences, because most of these guys that have been saying that, they don't know South Carolina's roster. They asked Dan Enos, and he said that's not true. There were still first-string people in there. They did not pull everybody out. They were running different packages on them. And so he wasn't just playing against second and third-string guys. He was playing against some of the first-string guys too, and he did a very good job. He did throw that pick 6, but he came back out and he shook it off and drove for a touchdown the next time. So, he did look good. I just don't want him to ruin him. I really believe he's our future and will be our quarterback at least the next year or two. I would say, he's got a full 4 years eligibility left because they redshirted him last year. But, I could see him not playing a lot this year and then playing a lot the next 2 years. And then if he don't leave for the draft, playing that third year as the starter, or it would actually be his 5th year in school. But, man, this kid's 6'7", weighs 265 pounds. If he does very good at all, the NFL will be beating down his door. He's a mountain. There ain't no doubt about that. So it'll be interesting to see who starts tonight. Be interesting to see how they handle all that. So go Hogs. Beat Bama if you can, please. I feel like and hope that Austin starts. He has the most experience, and I'm just afraid if they start Cole Kelly and play him the whole game that they'll run him forever. Alabama will just beat him up, and he won't ever be the same. So we'll see how that all takes place and shakes out this evening. Going to our job site tales for today. And I've been thinking about this a lot this week, trying to come up with what I wanted to tell. And thought I'd tell a few from my plant days. Kind of a couple of short ones and a long one, or maybe just get to the long one. I'm not sure how we're going to do that. I do want to mention, though, at the kind of the latter part of this program, we're going to talk about my grandma Parks. And I thought to try to put this show together today because of I'm going to talk about that because of a conversation I had this week with some people, but another conversation I had this week, and I thought if we got time, I'm going to throw that story out there about my mama, and I'll tell it. Y'all are going to get a kick out of it. We'll just have to wait and see if we get to it today. If we don't, we'll tell it in a couple of weeks or something, because it's there. It won't ever go away. Anyway, our job site tale today involves when I worked in the plant. And we're going to start off with one, and I'm not going to tell you where I worked, but I think you're going to pretty well know it, or at least know kind of what it was. Worked in a plant, and we built transformers is basically what we did, and distribution transformers. In our first story, uh, when pad mount transformers would come into this building, if they were, well, not just the big ones, all of them, but they would cut the tops out of these pad mounts to get the coil and core out of them to be rebuilt. Well, the really big ones that they had, they would cut the tops out, drain the oil, pull the coil and core out, rebuild them, and then those core and coils, once they're back together, the coils rewound, they put the core steel back around it. Those things are baked in an oven because the transformer, the winding and the insulation inside the transformer is actually made with a shellac coating. And they bake those things for two reasons. They get the moisture out of it first. So it has to be baked higher than the boiling point because they want to boil all that moisture out of there. And the second thing is to when it gets up to that kind of heat, all that shellac gets tacky. And then as it cools back down, it hardens, and then it makes just for a stronger winding. The wire is even coated in that shellac. But anyway, once they come out of the oven, they would set those transformer coil and cores down back in the tank. And then the really big ones, like the 500 kVA, for you electrical people know what I'm talking about, they would carry them up to the front of the final assembly because the pad mount department was in the back of the plant. Final assembly was up front. That's where the oiling stations were at. So they would take it up there and fill it full of mineral oil, transformer oil. And the pad mount department had a kid working for him, summer help. And I call him a kid. He had to be 18 at least to work in the plant. So I'm sure he was like a college kid, out for the summer. And he got on a forklift and brought a big transformer up there to the oiling station to put oil in it, which he did. Filled it up with transformer oil. And I wish I knew and could remember what kVA this was and how many gallons of oil it had in it. It was a lot. It was pretty big. I mean, we're using a 5,000-pound Hyster fork truck to carry it up to the front of the building. So it was no lightweight thing. But he got it filled up with oil, and he started back to the back to the pad mount department so they could weld the top back on this thing. And if you've ever drove a fork truck or anything like that, like a Sky Track or anything like that, they tell you to keep your load tilted backwards and as you're moving so that you don't accidentally drop it or off the front of your forks. Well, this thing was full of transformer oil, so instead of tilted back, he was trying to keep it pretty well level. And he was going slow to avoid sloshing it. Because again, there's no top on this big old tank. So he's easing towards the back of the plant with this transformer. And I'm not sure what year it actually was. It was in the 70s. They had added on to this plant. So there's a point, and I mean it's all the way across that whole plant from where the original building's at to where they added on some new structure. Well, they didn't get the floor exactly right because, as you construction people know, probably what they did is that back wall was still on the plant as they built the new wall or built the new plant, poured the slab and put the new building up, and then they tore that back wall out once it was all in the dry. Well, they didn't get the floor elevations exactly right. They're about a ½ inch off, so they had to come in, and there over about a foot all the way across the back of that plant, they poured a little concrete ramp thing to make the transition from one building to the other. Well, as he was coming down through there with the fork truck, he went off that little ½ inch lip, that little drop there and it wasn't just a drop. I mean, it's a smooth transition, but when he felt the fork truck kind of do the little going downhill thing, he panicked and stomped the brakes on that fork truck. Well, since he didn't have the load tilted back, he was trying to hold it level, which it actually as he went off was actually tilted a little forward, and then he nabbed the brakes. Well, guess what happened? That transformer oil sloshed and flipped that whole tank over off the forks and basically sent a tidal wave of mineral oil down the fork truck lane. It was a big, god-awful mess. Scared that kid to shit. His eyes were big around as silver dollars. I don't think they fired him, but I know we all scrambled and got oil dry and kind of got it contained and cleaned up, but it scared the living shit out of him. So just remember that as you're driving a fork truck, and don't panic if your load's not tilted back, because when you slam on the brakes, you're going to dump the load. Hope nobody took that wrong. Anyway, let's go on to another story in the plant, and this one I truly love, except for the fact somebody got fired. But it's like sometimes things happen and people get fired, and it's just what happens. Anyway, I'm going to try not to give too much information because I don't want people out there trying to figure out who this was. But as a little background on this story, in the early 60s and 70s, they had 2 concrete block rooms inside this plant that they called hothouses. Now, the one up front had like an 8-foot ceiling in it. It wasn't very tall. One in the back probably had a 24-foot ceiling, I would imagine, or something like that, because maybe not that high, maybe 18. But they could actually put pallet racks in there. And it was probably about 4 tiers high, these pallet racks. Well, over in the core department, the iron cores, the new ones came in on 4-foot by 4-foot pallets, and they had a box that was actually, they used a nail gun and shot it to that pallet that had like 2-foot sides on it. It's a cardboard box, shot to the pallet. They'd stack the iron cores in there, and then they would take another cardboard box that literally fit over the top of that first one for a lid. And they put that on there and then band it on, and that's how they shipped into us. Well, the core department would take that lid off, take their cores out and use them. Well, then they'd bring them over to the winding department, and as we wound transformer coils, we would stack them in these boxes, put the lids back on them, take a piece of notebook paper and write on there what they were. Like, there's 15 kVA transformer coils and the voltage and everything on them, and basically so you could stand at the pallet rack. We'd take them in the back hothouse and stack them in the pallet racks. And the core department, when they got ready for transformers, they could just go back there and look and see what they needed, pull the whole pallet and take it over to their department. Well, my supervisor was inventorying those one day. It's right after lunch, about an hour after lunch. And up on the 3rd shelf of the pallet rack, there was one of those boxes that didn't have a piece of notebook paper on the end of it telling what was in it. So, and again, you got to stop and think, folks. This was 30 years ago, probably. And now today, OSHA would have a shit fit over this. But he actually climbed the pallet rack and got up there on the 3rd shelf and took the box top off. Well, one of the guys in the plant was actually in there sleeping. He crawled up there during lunch, crawled in that box and went to sleep. And come to find out, he'd been doing it a lot. He'd come up missing for an hour or so every afternoon, and he was back there in that hothouse asleep. Nobody could find him, and then all of a sudden he'd show up and he'd make excuses about where he'd been and what he'd been doing. Well, my supervisor put the lid back down on that box, real careful, went and got his supervisor and the plant manager. Now here's the deal. In the 60s and 70s, they kept those hothouses as hot as they could get them. There was heaters hanging in there, gas-fired heaters, and they could run them as hot as they could get them because they thought they were doing something. And then they finally found out through an engineer that, the hotter the air gets, the more moisture it will hold, more humidity will hold until it reaches the boiling point. So until you get over 212 degrees Fahrenheit, you're actually hurting yourself by heating those coils up. So, because you're just introducing more moisture into them. So they quit using the actual heaters. These hot houses were well insulated, they were well built, and even with the overhead door open during the summer, they got stupid hot in there. And how he was inside that box sleeping without suffocating, I don't know. But they literally went and got a fork truck and reached up there and got that pallet and set it on the floor. Of course, now when they picked that pallet up and started down with it, he come awake and started, banging and carrying on trying to get out of that box. But they got him down on the ground and they took that cover off that box and basically walked him out the front door. It's like, you're fired, you're done. But how in the world this man was sleeping inside that box? I know that room, if it's during the winter, it was probably still 90 degrees in there. And during the summer, I bet it was way over 100. And he was inside a cardboard box. Craziest thing you've ever seen in your life, people. I just don't know how people did it. Now, I'm going to tell one more story from my plant days today. And I'm going to tie this into what we're going to talk about in a little bit. And you'll see that here in a second. Or actually, when I tell some stuff, I'm going to tell towards the end of the program. We had in the winding department, and this probably would have been 86, 87, maybe 88, but I don't think much past that. We had two big old boys working in the winding department. And one of them was kind of a bodybuilder guy. He worked out all the time, had big old arms. And the other was just a big old, just laid back country boy who normally wore overalls. And Lord strike me down if I'm lying, but this really happened this way. Because I'm going to tell you, he took his straps off when they got into it. And people are going to say, well, you're just throwing that in there for effect. It's like, no, he really did it. Beat all the hell you ever saw me. It's just like what you hear about it or see in the movies. But he takes one and gets it over right there because they're going to fight. It's like, I never understood that. To me, it looks like you're just asking for your overalls to fall off. But, that's just me. Anyway, these two big old boys got into it one day. They're in the winding department, screaming at each other. And to be honest with you, I don't even know what they got into it about. I mean, I'm sure one of them probably looked at the other one wrong or something. God only knows. You know how people are. People fight the drop of a hat. But anyway, they got into it. And they started towards each other. And the one guy, he pulled his strap off his overalls. And he reached down. We had these maple paddles, not pallets. Had these maple hardwood paddles that we used to beat transformer coils with. And people are going, you did what? And he's like, that's a whole nother story about how to wind a transformer coil. And we might do that one of these days. For all you electricians out there that want to know how transformers actually made, we might talk about that one of these days. Might be kind of interesting. Anyway, he picked up this paddle, and it's probably, like 8-10 inches wide by 14-16 inches long with a handle on it. Well, the other guy, seeing this, like, well, he's going to be armed and all that. He's, I need me a weapon too. Everybody needs a weapon. And he picked up a bundle of aluminum transformer leads. Now, I know what people are going to say. He did what? It's like, well, we had these transformer leads, aluminum strip transformers that were 1.25 inches wide by a little over an 1/8 inch thick. People are going to go, Bob, it's aluminum, that's flimsy as crap. Well, it is. It's kind of like picking up a stick out in the front yard and snapping it with your hand. It's flimsy as crap. But if you pick up 4 or 5 sticks and bundle them together, now all of a sudden it's pretty stiff and you can't just break it with your hands unless you're Mr. Olympia or something, our world's strongest man. You might have to bundle 3 or 4 trees together to keep him from snapping them. But they usually bundled these together in 12, 14 leads. They put them together and tape them. So now you've got a 24-inch long by 1.25 inches wide, about 2-inch thick piece of aluminum. So yeah, now you got you a pretty good weapon too. Well, they started at each other, moving in, they're going in, they're screaming and yelling at each other, and they are literally right behind my machine. I mean, everybody in the department had stopped working and turned around and was watching because we thought we were going to get to see some blood or something, brains, or God only knows. People, when you work in a plant that's boring, you take your excitement where you can get it. Which just made me think of a bunch of other stories in the plant that we're going to have to tell someday. Anyway, they started at each other, and my supervisor at the time, the guy that was over the wine department, literally was about 5'0". He was a little bitty feller. And he actually got in between these two big old boys. And now I'm 6 foot tall, and both of these guys are taller than me. So, I mean, they were big old boys. He got in between them, and they turned around basically and went back to their corners, it would be a good analogy. And it was over with. It was done with. Well, then the finger point starts and all that. So they got to decide now, because nobody actually fought. If they had actually fought, they both would have got fired. But now they got to decide, well, are we going to fire anybody, suspend anybody? All that's got to take place. So they took everybody in the winding department, one at a time, back to the plant manager's office with the supervisor and one of the people from human resources back there. And they basically took a statement from everybody about what they saw and what happened. Well, when it was my turn to go, I go back there, sitting there with the plant manager, sitting there with the supervisor, you got a person from human resources over here. And it's, I'm not saying it's different, but the plant manager has basically known me all my life, or almost all my life, because he knows my dad. He's friends with my dad. So he basically, I'm sure I got a little different speech than what everybody else did, because he wanted to know why I didn't stop it. He's like, Bob, it was right there behind your machine. They were right there. Why didn't you try to get in between them? And I said, well, here's the deal. This is my opinion, and my opinion only. It was then, it still is now. You get in between two big old boys that are fixing to hook up and go at each other, the first person that's going to get hurt is you. And especially my supervisor, because like I said, he was a little bitty fella. And I looked at him and I said, you were stupid as hell for getting in between them two big old boys. I said, if they were going to fight, there would have been nothing you could have done. Plus, they both had a weapon in their hand. I said, the only thing you lucked out on was they both were looking for an excuse not to fight. And they were both like, well, that's kind of harsh. And I'm like, well, it's the truth. That was a stupid thing to do. You don't get in between two big old boys who's trying to fight. You let them go at it, and if they need an excuse not to fight, they'll find it. But that was probably the craziest thing I've seen in the plant. Maybe it's not the craziest. We'll get into some other plant stories at some time because there's some good ones. And I got something to say about our job site tales, and just so people know when they send us in job site tales. I had a couple of guys this week on a job site that told me job site tales. And it's like, okay, this is the internet, and we're pretty much can say whatever, but there are some things we can't say. And me personally, I don't want to talk about. So if your job site tale involves any person or animal getting hurt, we probably don't need to tell it on here. I don't know, that's just my personal opinion. And I actually forgot to tell these tales to my producer this morning. And I will run them by him before we decide to use them one way or the other. Because I don't know. I had a problem with them. So we'll just wait and see what he says. And just so you know, if and when we do use them, I won't tell you that these were the tales I was talking about. You won't know. I'll keep that little shit to myself. Moving on today, now that we've done our job site tales for the day, I hope y'all found them humorous and funny. Some things I want to talk about that are in the news right now. I'm not going to go into this very deep because I'm not giving this guy very much publicity for this, but I'm sure everybody knows that Eminem came out this week with a rap song against Trump like he thinks he's still relevant. That makes no sense to me. I saw somebody posted a meme this week about, I can't remember how it said it now. I should have wrote it down. Talking about Rosie O'Donnell, talking about how fast she ruined her career. Nobody could come out and ruin their career faster than she did. And then it showed Eminem saying, "Hold my beer," because he just made him look like a jackass. And I'll be honest with you, I tried to watch the video. I couldn't even get through part of it. I barely got through I don't think I got through a minute of it, and I shut it off. That's just how it is. And I think that's all we need to talk about on that subject, because I don't think we should give him any publicity at all, personally. The other thing I wanted to talk about today is Jan Morgan. Jan Morgan, and I hope y'all follow her on Facebook and Twitter. If you don't, you should. If you're a conservative, you believe in Second Amendment rights, you should be following Jan Morgan. She's a Fox contributor on Fox News. I mean, when they have something about the Second Amendment, she's the one they turn to. She owns the Gun Cave in Hot Springs, Arkansas. She's a gun enthusiast. She is a concealed carry, or she's licensed by the state police to be a concealed carry instructor. She has her concealed carry license. She open carries and talks about why she can open carry in the state of Arkansas. I'm not going to try to go through all that because she is the expert. And believe me, she's got it. All those arguments out there on her Facebook page. So go over there and read those. If you're a Second Amendment guy or girl, you need to be following her. She announced this week that she is starting an exploratory committee for governor of the state of Arkansas. She's fed up with Asa Hutchins acting like a Democrat, and she is thinking very seriously about running for governor on the next election cycle. I'm excited about this. Like I said, she just announced Thursday or Friday that she was setting up a committee to actually do exploratory for that. So nothing about her official platforms come out yet. You know she's going to be Second Amendment all the way. I mean, that goes without saying right there. So we'll just have to wait and see what her platform is as far as whether we're going to vote for her or not. Right now, I'm very excited about it. I mean, I try to listen to all her stuff that she does on our state congressmen and state senators, because they're kind of doing the same thing that the national guys are doing. They ran as Republicans and conservatives, then they've gotten over there and they're acting like Democrats or liberals, and it's like we got to nip that crap in the bud. And like this week, I know tomorrow, Sunday, from 2 to 4, she's going to be in Alma, Arkansas at Warren's Rec Room speaking. It's $5 to get in. And I'm going to try to start keeping everybody up to date where she's going to be at as far as her speaking engagements. And if you get a chance and can get to Alma, go see her. If you live around in that area, go see that. And if you go see one of her programs when she speaks, hit us up on Facebook at the Bumpkin Army and tell us how it went. Maybe a little bit about what she said. Of course, I'm going to keep following her on Facebook and Twitter. And we will report as this goes on. We'll keep you updated as to what her platform is going to be. It'll be interesting to see. So remember that name, Jan Morgan, for governor. And Arkansas's never had a female governor. This would be a first for us. I think this will be cool, especially her. She is so Second Amendment that it's awesome. She gets in there as governor, we'll all be open carrying. It'll be wild, wild west here in Arkansas, maybe. I'm going to get in trouble for that statement. That's what's fixing to happen. I wanted to move on in this part of the show. I want to talk about somebody that is very dear to my heart, and that was my grandma Parks. And my people in my family, if any of y'all are watching this, I'm going to ask y'all to do me some favors, and hopefully y'all will. There's a bunch of documentation out there on Grandma Parks. Grandma was born in 1892. She died in 1981. And she was a very sweet lady. Very sweet. I loved my Grandma Parks dearly. And part of what we're going to talk about is, number one, is preserving your family history. And this part we're going to go for anybody. And the other part I'm going to tie back into getting between two people when they're fixing to fight. Yeah, I know what I said about never do it, but there has been a time in my life that I'm probably glad somebody did, because Bumpkin Bob ain't serving, 10 to life, or didn't serve 10 to life or 10 to 15 for voluntary manslaughter. But the part about preserving your family history, one thing about the old Bumpkin doing what we're doing is I know all my stories that I'm going to tell, and the things I tell about my childhood and about my family and my opinions, these are being preserved for my kids and grandkids. I mean, they're going to be able to look back, and when they're bullshitting, and my nieces and nephews too. You remember Uncle Bob telling that story about blah, blah, blah? They'll be able to go back and actually hear it and see it. And they won't get to a point in their life like I have, where I'm 52 years old, and it's not just my Grandma Parks. It's my dad and my mom and people that have touched my life that I go, man, I wish I could remember these stories they told. They never wrote them down. They didn't record themselves telling them. And like Grandma Parks she would come up and stay with us in Little Rock and stay a week or two here and there. She even came down during Christmas a couple times and stayed with us. And I can remember as a little kid sitting at her feet and listening to her tell stories. Those stories involve things like the fact that her dad was a doctor, and he was a Dickens, and I'm going to tell about that in a minute too. Her name was actually Dickens before she got married to my grandpa Parks, but she was born in Faulkner County, Arkansas, but for a time they lived over in the Indian territories. Now we're talking about, she was born in 1892, so they lived in the Indian territories in and around 1900, in that time frame. And and he was a doctor over there. Over here in Oklahoma is where I'm talking about, for y'all that don't know what the Indian Territory is. But she had those stories. And then my grandpa Parks, after she got married, was the postmaster in Denard. Now, for those of you that aren't from Arkansas or maybe aren't history buffs, that area in Arkansas down around Hot Springs during Prohibition and the Great Depression, that era, that was like Las Vegas South. That was Las Vegas before it was Las Vegas. There was a lot of gambling and prostitution and corruption, and there was a lot of gangsters hung out in Hot Springs, Arkansas. I bet y'all didn't know that. And if you watched ATN a little more often, you would. There's a show on ATN, and you can probably find it on their website in their archives, where they talk about Hot Springs during that time. Now, it was kind of an unwritten rule as far as the gangsters that Hot Springs was off limits as far as violence. If you left Chicago or that area and you went down to Hot Springs, you kept yourself in check. You went down there for the gambling, the prostitutes, and the liquor, and you left the violence up in the business of being a gangster, so to speak, in Chicago. Well, that Highway 65 corridor, that thing runs from Louisiana up to the Canadian border. So, I mean, that U.S. Highway 65 corridor running through Clinton, Arkansas, and Denard, Arkansas, and up through Harrison was major traveling back then for the gangsters. So she met people at the post office, because it was also the bus station back then. And my family knows this, but there's nothing in Denard. There's probably a couple of little stores, and then, like old country stores, just small. We call them convenience stores today, but there probably wasn't nothing convenient about them. But that and the post office, that's all there was, in the bus station. So, if I would love to know if any of my older cousins remember those stories. Let's see if we can get them written down. Now, I tell that about Grandma Parks and my love for Grandma Parks, because I absolutely loved her. And it's funny because there's a song by Merle Haggard called Grandma Heart. If you had never heard it, go on YouTube and find it and listen to it, because it makes me think of Grandma Parks when I hear it. But I told that the background. Had a little conversation this week, and that's what brought this story back kind of up. And it got brought up again at my dad's 80th birthday party, because there are still people in my grandma's family that don't know this story or don't know exactly what took place. And I'm going to tell this as I can without using any names or anything. Other than my mom and dad and me and my sister that was actually involved in this. Grandma Parks died in May of 81. And I was 15 years old. And when we went up for the funeral and everything, and we actually stayed with my Granny Griggs that night, or those nights that we were up there. We were up there several days. Stayed with my Granny Griggs, but we'd gotten up that morning of the funeral, which was going to be, she's being buried there at Denard Cemetery, and the funeral was going to be there at the little church in Denard. Well, we got ready, and this is my whole family, as far as my mom and dad, my sisters and brother-in-laws, were all there. So we leave Granny Griggs' house and we go up to an aunt's house there in Denard, who is my mom's sister. So we're at her house, and there's a lot of people there, a lot. We're all gathered there, for the funeral that day. And that's where most people are bringing food and stuff. I mean, I don't know if y'all have ever been, especially out in the country like that. Everybody pretty much brings food, and the family shouldn't or doesn't ever have to really cook. But and this is post laying them out at the house days. Grandma Parks wasn't laid out at my aunt's house, and now some of y'all are going to be going, Bob, what the hell are you talking about? And it's like, man, if you were raised in rural Arkansas or rural any place, probably in the South. I know they did in the South. I don't know about up north. You Yankees do things different. But in the South, probably pre 1975, 76. I'm not exactly sure when they started kind of frowning on this. When somebody passed away, the funeral home would pick them up, get them ready. They'd be embalmed or whatever, put them in their casket, and they would bring them back to the house. And people would set up with the dead. I mean, that's just how it was. And, your loved one would be at the house till the day of the funeral. The funeral home would come pick them up from the house. And the casket would be open. I mean, it wasn't closed sitting over there in the corner. The casket was open. You could go view the body if you wanted to. But anyway, we were at my aunt's house, and I had some family members, we'll call it that way, that were trying to sell Grandma's place. They were trying to get a tax deed to it so that they could sell it, because it was the way it was set up through my grandpa after he passed away. Would have took a bunch of people having to sign to be able to sell it, and it was just a big hassle. So this family member was, at that time in Arkansas, if you paid the real estate taxes on a piece of property for 7 years, you could get a tax deed to it, and it was yours. Well, my mom and a cousin was blocking that pretty much. They were the ones standing in the way. And as we were getting ready to leave for the church that morning, my mom and dad had walked out and sat on the front porch. Now, if I was a betting man, I would say, and I'm going to say this so that I don't get chastised from family members, there's at least 50 to 60 people at my aunt's house, if not over 100. We'll put it that way. There's a lot of people there. Mom and dad walked out and sat on the front porch, and I have and always will respect my elders. But this family member came up on the porch, took a stand in front of my mom and started wagging his finger at her and basically screaming and cussing her out because she was the driving force behind blocking him from getting a tax deed to that place. And my mom was crying, and everybody just sat there, including my dad. And I kind of looked around first. I mean, I respect my elders, and I looked to my elders to take care of this situation. Number one, this was definitely the wrong time and the wrong place to be doing this. So I scanned through everybody. My dad, and I'm talking about the male figures in my life. My dad, my brother-in-laws, and then the cousins, because I've got cousins on my mom's side of the family that are old enough to be my mom and dad, or be my dad. So I looked at them, and everybody just stood there. Nobody took care of it. They were just letting this family member have his say. So I had taken it as long as I could take it. I walked up. I grabbed this family member by the shoulder, spun him around, and basically when I spun him around, his back was to the front door of my aunt's house. And I told him that he needed to get in the fucking house. Which, if talking to, number one, saying fucking probably would have got me in trouble. Number two, talking to an elder that way really would have got me in trouble if it had been in any other circumstance. But I told him he needed to get in the fucking house. And he looked at me at first like he thought he wanted some of it. And, you know, and I don't know that he did or he didn't. I'm trying to think. My mama would have been about 50 at that time. Is that right? Maybe not quite 50. Maybe 47. So this person was probably in their 50s. But he turned around and looked at me like he wanted some. And then here comes the part tying back into the story earlier about getting between two people that are fixing to hook up. Most of the time it is not a good idea. Other times it works out. This time it happened to work out. But my sister, and she knows which one she is, Dana, got between us, and I guess with 3 little words, she probably stopped me from getting charged with manslaughter or maybe murder. I don't know, because when I get mad and I black out, I don't stop. But she got between us and looked me dead in the eye and said, "Don't hit him, Bobby." And when she said that, the expression on his face went from, "I think I want some of this," to, "I think I better get in the fucking house." And he went in the fucking house. And that's pretty much how that ended. We went to the funeral that day, and me and him didn't speak. I don't think I ever spoke to him again in my life. I don't know that my mom did, but I know that I didn't. And I don't know who else in the family may or may not have. But again, that's pretty much where that ended up at. And pretty much goes into be very careful who you get in between. Hopefully it works out for you. Now, about that story, I told that story, and there's a lot of interesting things about my grandma Parks that maybe we can revisit at some point, because there's some interesting things about her lineage, if I said that correct. I'll give y'all a little taste, and maybe some people can figure out. Number one, her dad was a Dickens. Think about that for a minute. And think about the time period this was. She was born in 1892. Remember that. And her mom was a Polk. P-O-L-K. If I'm pronouncing that correctly. So think about that for a minute and see if you can come up with her lineage. I've got some cousins out there that have all that documentation. I would love to have it myself if I could get one of them to send it to me. Please. I love y'all. I just want a little information. And that being said, also, any of my cousins, and maybe if they can remember some of these, we could tell them here on the air. If y'all go over to the Bumpkin Army page on Facebook and hit me up if y'all remember any of those stories that Grandma Parks used to tell, because they were awesome. You know, it's like, and it's stuff that we need to preserve, people. That being said, I'm going to make another statement. If you're, if you've got grown kids and grandkids, or expecting grandkids, go buy you a spiral notebook or a legal pad, something that you can write on. And as you think about things that you've done in your life, things maybe your grandpa told you or your grandma told you, or your dad told you, write those down and be as detailed as you can. And then let one of your kids or grandkids know where that's at. Maybe even like at Christmas time and Thanksgiving time, get that out and read a couple of those stories and share that with your family. We have lost so much of that. Not only we talked about in an earlier episode about teaching and preaching and about teaching people things that we've lost. Well, not only have we lost that kind of stuff, we've lost those stories and the things that people did, and we really need to preserve that. So, try to write those down. Get you a video camera and film. I don't know how much time you can get on those digital cards, but you can put a lot of time on there. But film those things and share them with your family, not just your kids and grandkids. Share them with your cousins and your brothers and sisters. Maybe there's things that you remember that they don't, or maybe something you remember jogs a memory of them, and let's, and especially, because that's family time. That's what I think of when I think about Thanksgiving and Christmas. I think family time. Carry your notebook with you during Christmas and stuff and share some of those stories during that time when you're fellowshipping with your family. Fellowshipping. I'm not sure that I said that right. That was kind of funny sounding. Anyway, and kind of reconnect like that, because I know it's not just my family. There are things that other people know. Now, again, and I talked about this in teaching and preaching. We talked about, my grandpa being a moonshiner. It's like, I don't remember my Granny Griggs telling stories, not to me anyway. And I was only 9 when Grandpa Griggs died, so I don't really remember any stories of him telling. I got cousins out there and got aunts. Write that stuff down and start sharing it with the family. I mean, that's stuff everybody'd like to know, that I would love to know it. I know y'all would. So do that with your own families. Share those stories and, where you came from and or where your family came from is what I'm talking about. I know the Griggses ended up over there around the Scotland area. They came from Tennessee, but that's about as far back as I know, But I had one of my dad's cousins tell me one time at my dad's funeral that my Granny Griggs knew all that. She was a Watt, but she knew the history of the Griggs family. And I don't know if she did or didn't share that with any of my aunts or any of my cousins. If y'all know that, write it down and share that. I'd love to hear it. As a matter of fact, speaking of stories like that, we're in the process of trying to get one of my sisters to write down some stuff from the trailer park. It would be, a book basically, but it would be a hoot. She's very good at that kind of stuff. She's excellent writer. It's like, man, if we could get her to interview some of these people we grew up with and lived around in the trailer park and write a book on that, either a book of short stories or just a book, it would be awesome. And so, oh my God, I'm just rambling about the same shit, I know. A little bit of stuff coming up. I was telling my son this morning, I talked to some guys about, and I told y'all last week we were going to do this, competing in the Gambler 500 this year in Arkansas. It'll roll back again in next September, I do believe. We are really going to do that. Man, I've got some people on board, and we're going to start looking at it pretty hard and trying to decide what we're going to do. So be looking for us at that. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at Bumpkin Bob Show. Make sure you go over there and like us on Facebook on the Bumpkin Bob Show. Join the Bumpkin Army. I want to hear those job site tales. if you get a chance to see Jan Morgan, jot us some stuff down on the Bumpkin Army about that. If you know anything about registering or if they've made dates for the Gambler 500 next year, I want to know that. And we just want feedback on our shows too, people. Let us know what's going on. Gonna wrap up today. We've had a good show. Everybody root for the Hogs. Oh, and go over there to YouTube and watch the Woo Pig Suey song by Brian Kinder. You hear the intro every week when you watch our show, so go over there and listen to that. It's a great song about the Arkansas Razorbacks and playing games. And let's hope Arkansas does good today. At least, I think they'll at least make a showing against Alabama. They probably won't win, but I think they'll do pretty good. And next week, we'll keep you updated on the Jeff Long saga, whether he comes out and denies or doesn't come out at all about the Nebraska job. So till next week, this is Bumpkin Bob. We're out.